Hey friends and relations, how are you today? It is Wednesday, the 8th of July, and we're going to draw for a little bit today. Thought I'd give you guys an update. I've been working on this for about an hour today, 2 or 3 hours yesterday, a few hours the day before that. So we're still working on this commission piece for a good friend who is willing to commission some artwork in this tough time. This is awesome for me because I'm out of work. I've been out of work for 8 months. I had an amazing trip around the country, got inspired, been spending some time with some friends, been working on my own portfolio, looking for new work. So this is something that keeps me motivated to keep doing work, and I'm going to try to share with you my motivation so that you too out there can get some work done today if you're struggling getting some work done. I think by sharing, everyone kind of gets motivated. It's a wild time. It's a wild time. Hey, thanks, Jonathan Edwards. Wow, dude. Glad you hopped in right away. Right away. Right away. Let me ask you, do you lurk on Facebook all day like I do? Because I'm on Facebook all day. I'm on my computer. Facebook's up. People can message me. I'm getting inspired by people around me. Probably reading too much news. Thanks, man. I'm pretty glad you're jazzed about this. So I'm having fun. I spent a lot of time on Mr. Steam Train guy the other day. Did some more work on the sales. Did some work on Rusty Scupper, doing wave stuff. The way I'm approaching this is typically left to right, and then kind of getting into a specific area to go nuts with it, and then bring it up. I took a painting class back at Mike. It was Abby Sangiamo. That's not who I'm thinking of. I love Abby Sangiamo. I had two classes with him, portraiture and imaging from cinema. Both were great. Portraiture was intense. Imaging from cinema was just fun. Who am I thinking of? Bob Salazar? I think it was Bob Salazar, painting teacher. And he told me to go work around the canvas, work the whole thing, and think about what's most important, and then go down and down from there. So today, we're going to be rendering up the dolphins, and they're going to have some Fallout 4 style laser guns on top of their heads. So this is what I've been painting today. I have my reference up. I got some dolphin pictures from the internet. This is a pretty good dolphin face. I think this might actually be a Chesapeake dolphin as well. I'm not sure. And then we got some reference of some dolphins jumping, stock photos from the internet as well. Thank you, Google, for giving me that. And then we're also going to work on the USS Torsk a little bit. I realized when I originally drew the Torsk that I put some elements from a German Type 9 submarine, which were the lines coming from the bow and the stern that go towards the mast in the middle. So I just struck those out, and maybe I'm going to work on the details of the Torsk a little bit. So what's important here? I have the Torsk. We're going to be exaggerating it to be shorter just so it fits in the canvas a little bit. John says, I'm constantly writing, watching, and working. Keeps the brain bold and not bored. Awesome. Awesome. Writing. What are you writing these days? What are you writing about? I mean, I journal. I have I have 5 journals going. One on my phone. I got a journal here. I got one by my bed that I write before I go to bed. I got one on each computer in my house in case I have an idea while I'm sitting there. Particularly like if I'm listening to a fish show or watching a TV show and I get inspired, I can just like quickly type out something. Man, I'm thinking about how, we haven't been to concerts in a long time. And when I used to go to concerts, I used to get in the mosh pit because it was fun. Because I used to play football growing up, so I was used to like pushing people and getting after it. And then as time went on, I realized it was more and more dangerous to be in the mosh pit because you can get into fights. And then sometimes kids were like, I remember going to a show. I think it was with the great painter Katie Miller. She's a big Aquabats fan, and we went to this Aquabats show down in Silver Spring. And there was one kid, like there was a couple kids trying to mosh at an Aquabats show, and it was like parents with kids there and stuff. Like this ain't cool, man. This ain't. What is going on? And I feel like there isn't as much access to punk rock anymore, and people need to get it out. I once heard a theory from a cop about violence, about like fighting and violence now, and that because kids aren't playing sports as much as they used to, that they're not getting their aggression out, and so they're either on video games all day, and then when they just it's easier to get into a fight. I know when I played football, I had no fight in me at all. I had all the fight beaten out of me by Wednesday, and then Thursday, Friday, I was just dragging my behind to practice, and then Saturday, I just had no aggression left, especially for someone I didn't know. like it's one thing to like beat up on people you know who volunteer to be beat up on, but like let's say I was in Stanford and we're playing Bridgeport, and I knew these kids were really poor in Bridgeport. I mean, they just not a happy place to grow up. I didn't want to beat these kids up. Plus, I couldn't beat anybody up anyway. I wasn't that strong. I mean, I was big for my age group, I guess, but not compared to football players. I remember just being like these little smaller kids who weren't raised as well, whatever. Like I don't want to fight them. What is this? And like I started to really question playing football on top of all the injury I got from it. I really was I was more of a theater kid, and football was good just to keep my grades in order. So anyway, back to the aggression thing. Like, so this mosh pit breaks out in an Aquabats show, and they actually stopped the show. Like, the band stopped. It was like, hey, chill out, chill out. We got parents, we got dads with their daughters there, dads with their sons, moms. Like, this is not a mosh pit kind of show. And my conclusion from that was, man, there's just not enough punk shows anymore. Like with the death of punk, there's no moshing. I mean, dude, I was in the mosh pit in 1999, Woodstock, Corn. It was like 50,000 people moshing. It was insane. I was in good shape back in those days, and I was picking up dudes off the ground. People who were like passing out because they were completely dehydrated from being in upstate New York on a 95-degree day, drinking and partying and having a good old time. And then 9 p.m., Corn comes out, and the mosh pit goes nuts during Blind, just like crazy, just 40,000 people, dudes just like smashing into each other. It was like Greco-Roman wrestling or something because dudes were wearing like all the shirts had been thrown out in the dirt and just shirtless dudes everywhere, sweaty and gross. It was crazy, man. So I think this time's kind of like that mosh pit that should have been Aquabats show. Like, is it time to get mad at each other and fight? No, I mean, it's time for good conversations, I think. Education conversations. But a lot of these I found myself in a social justice related fight on my Facebook page, and it felt like a mosh pit. Like nothing was really going to come out of this. People were going to get their aggression out, they're going to get their angst out, and then go. Nothing would happen either legally or anything of any real effect, and then people would go back to their lives before. And on one hand, you got some of that anger out, but on the other hand, like you just feel negative about society. I got into a mosh pit fight at a Joy Formidable show in that same venue in Silver Spring, Fillmore. And I just think there's something like angry people living in Silver Spring, man. Like I think some dudes show up in mosh pits are crazy. It's just like a sampling of the population. You have some dudes who bounce around and they keep their arms to themselves, or their arms are down and they're just shoulder bumping people, and you have a little bit of padding there. And then there's the one jackhole who's got like a leather studded jacket and leather belts and is throwing punches and is just like super aggressive. That's more punk. Like dude, like dudes throwing punches, you need to go to a punk show. You need to go see Henry Rollins back in the day and just get your fight on. Uh, Dude, somewhere else, dude. You can't just be punching random people. If there's what I think a lot of I'm not saying I'm completely mentally healthy, but I think a lot of people don't understand what is a socially acceptable norm, or else don't even care. And if they can get away with something, they're going to try to do it. And the mosh pit is society in a microcosm. Some people, if they can get away with hurting somebody else and throwing their body around and writhing about for whatever purpose, is it to hurt somebody? Is it to establish like I exist, man? I'm fucking here. I'm gonna make a space. Maybe I need to go read a book on mosh pit psychology, but that's kind of what it feels like on social media right now. People are getting into fights over things they would never get into fights with in person. If you were in a daylight cafe outside, you're having a civil conversation over tea and crumpets. If you're having a nice crab soup, crab bisque, Baltimore's one of the wonderful things. Christina chimed in. So cool. Thanks for sharing your work. Thank you for saying you were here, Christina. I appreciate it. I appreciate that you like what I'm doing, and I appreciate that you're telling me that you're here, so that way I know who's watching and what people think. Trying to inspire others by doing the work, by doing some work. Dude, I'm not. It's hard to be productive. I commend everybody who's working at all right now. I read a statistic, and I wish I could tell you where I got this from. I don't remember. It was somewhere on the internet that uh, the average worker in America really only does like 2 to 3 hours of work a day, 3 to 4 hours, like tops, real work. At Zynga, I remember they had a policy which was they're expecting 6 hours of work and 2 hours of conversation and breaks. And when I was briefly at my last job for 9 months, we got so much done. When we had a good team that was conversing very well, that first year was extremely productive. And I don't think the average person was working more than 20 hours a week. But we were in the same space, and a lot of that, like half the time we were there, we were just building that teamwork, that communication. When you can communicate good with other people, then you can get more done in a quicker amount of time. Look at the way the Army trains. You know, they're doing months and months of training for a deployment. It's part of it is to get the physicality up and the skills up, but the other part of it is just to work on their communication. You watch a war movie and you see how soldiers communicate in the field. It's very direct. Everyone has to get on board with the same lingo so that when bullets start flying over their heads, they can issue orders, flank, right, move, this, and people know a couple few words, and that communication is crystal clear so that people can move on a dime. What's up, L? L says love is in the house. I appreciate it. Christina says she likes my mosh pit microcosm too. I really think that's what's going on. Add some caffeine, add some sugar, add some substances to that, and who knows what's going to happen. I remember, I have to admit, the second mosh pit. This was the mosh pit I stopped doing moshes after. It was probably 4 years ago. I went to go see Joy Formidable, which is a wonderful band from Glasgow. Three-piece, chick lead singer named Ritzy Collins. Awesome. She can shred on the guitar. And it was a chill show. Their first album was pretty raucous. Kind of like the difference between Green Day's first album and Green Day's latest album, like they just kind of age and soften up a little bit. Their first album was kind of intense, and I could see bouncing around and bumping into people. When I saw them with their second album at the Auto Bar, it was bouncing around, but no moshing, no like people slam dancing into each other, none of that. And that was Auto Bar too in Baltimore, which is a small venue, and some of the riled up kids will come out to the Auto Bar. So I saw them Silver Spring, and there's like one kid like slam dancing in an audience of like 400, 500 people. I think Joy Formidable was opening up for. Oh wait, the Taurus does not have vent tubes in the front. It's not a class of submarine that has the open gate. That's interesting. It's got a weld mark. I'm looking at the photo right here. So dude is like pissing everybody off. I can see it in the crowd, and I actually grabbed the dude and I just like pinned him down for a little bit. And he got all kinds of pissed off. I'm like, dude, you're slamming it. This is not the show. You're the only guy in a room full of people making it uncomfortable for everybody else. And he's like, oh, screw you, man, screw you. What do you do? What are you doing? And look at what you're doing. Who else is trying to mosh? No one else is doing this. Like he kept slamming into me, and it just pissed me off because I hold my ground. I'm the guy that if a mosh pit breaks out, I insert myself into the wall so that whoever's in the mosh pit can bounce against me. I have a little bit of training from football. I get low, I get my hands up, I can get my elbows up, and some 90-pound person isn't going to get knocked on their face and lose their glasses if I'm in the way. 280 pound, 6'1" Tom Tom. And like, I don't know, I'm not in shape, but my scale says I got 75 pounds of muscle on me. That means like I got 50 to 90% more muscle even on my frame than 90-pound so-and-so to the left who's going to get flattened by a mosher. So I insert myself on that wall. Second reason is it's cooler on the inside of the wall because there's more air coming down into the pit. So I'm trying to protect my friends and other people who don't want to get slammed up. And this dude gets into a big old fight, and it's really awkward. I said, "Hey man, let me buy you a beer." He's like, "No, screw you, fuck you, fuck you, fuck you." And so I just like leave. It's a band. I drove 90 minutes down to Silver Spring to go see. They're from Glasgow. They're not coming to America all the time. And I walked out. I felt terrible. Like this dude like looked so angry. Like what if he came out and like had a knife in the parking lot and finds me? So I just went home. You don't know what's going to happen with people. So I stopped doing the mosh pit thing since that. since that show. I would be on the outside. Maybe I'll, watch from a couple rows back or something. But typically, if I'm at a show and I see that pit open up in the middle, I just make my way to the back or the upper deck where I'm not tempted to get involved because people are just too crazy. Like, when I was younger, you don't see the consequence of actions. Now that I'm getting older, I'm seeing the conflict. Dude, what you do has permanent consequences, and things can very quickly go from bumping shoulders into somebody to someone gets their nose broken and has to go to the hospital and then files charges. And then it goes quickly from that to like someone pulls a knife and gets cut on or cut somebody else, and then suddenly you have a felony assault and someone gets killed. I remember a story that broke my heart was about, I think it was Tom Molesky, correct me if I'm wrong, but a bouncer at Auto Bar who threw a dude out of Auto Bar who was being unruly, and that dude went to a car and grabbed a carabiner knife and came out. It's so sad. Like things get out of hand so quick. To admit that mosh pit story from Silver Spring, I had a couple beers before going into the venue. I bought some. I think it was October, so I had a pumpkin fest or something, some Sam Adams pumpkin fest. I counted two of those and went in. And I think alcohol, man, is quite dangerous when it comes to behavior in civil society. So how does that relate to the social media thing? I think people are frustrated and they have no outlet. They're not able to talk with other people in person, and just all this angst is being focused in a really terrible way. I started paying attention to what's going on Twitter. Uh, Believe it or not, I had a reporter reach out to me, and maybe he'll watch this. I had a reporter reach out to me from Los Angeles, considering who wanted to know more about what happened with me in my last job, and I don't know what to do yet. I have to talk to my attorney still regarding discussing what happened with the news media. I can't see a good outcome for me and my former coworkers um, because of that. But things can escalate so quickly with the digital media that we're in, and if you believe people who are saying speech is violence, which I disagree with strongly. I think violence is violence and speech is speech. I mean, you have the First Amendment is speech, Second Amendment is violence. Two distinct, very distinct things. Uh, you need violence to protect speech. That's how that works. You need the threat of violence to protect the free speech issue. That's what that was intended for. Is my shebang. My feeling on the subject. Subject to change, as all things are. Second protects the first. So, but now, like cancel culture, which is outing people online, is affecting careers. And I just was, as soon as it happened with Dan Kroll at Micah, with a teacher who I'd heard a lot of bad rumors about, but I didn't know the man personally. My only criticism of Dan Kroll was all the students work looked identical. Like everyone coming out of that class had the same looking kind of thesis. And I taught at Micah 2 classes, and I wondered, like, dude, I wonder how long till I get something. How long does someone come out and say something bad about me? And I thought I was a pretty decent guy, but I might have said some things off the top of my head that make sense to me, but aren't politically correct or socially correct. Like, what's it going to be? And that time for that to happen was about 2 weeks, and that happened. And I got called out, and I got blamed for. I got accused of saying something that I absolutely did not say at all. It was wildly incorrect. And I'm like, how the heck? I kind of want to talk to the people privately who accused me of this and be like, what did you hear? Like, what did I say, and why are you accusing me of these kinds of things? Don't you want to hear my side of the story, or you just want to cancel my ability to teach? So it seems like there's some institutions. I loved my alma mater, Micah, but there's some weird speech rules going on over there. I think that they do need to clean house. I wonder how many colleges have had some kind of scandal when it comes to power of teaching? Probably a lot. Look, I think Micah does some amazing things. The strongest thing about Micah is probably the recruiting department. I think it brings in some really talented people. With the school getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bringing people more international students in, it's gonna be harder to socialize so many people together. So you are losing some of that exposure. Like as a student of Micah, you're going to lose some exposure to other students because there's just too many people. Micah, when I went, was kind of like a graduate type program, small, focused, a lot of attention. Let's see what people are saying. Christina's cracking up. That's cool. A lot of people drinking and Facebooking. Yeah, for sure, for sure. I mean, I like to have a beer every day. I wish I didn't have a beer every day, but I have to support my local Gunpowder Falls Brewing Company. Love that place. I'm getting off what I wanted to do. I wanted to be working on the Torsk and the Dolphin today. USS Torsk. Something we're seeing detail-wise is those vent holes are actually down by the teeth. Then there's, I think this is a torpedo tube here, and we have the, was this eyeball, anchor, fin. So we have the main pressure hull. The pressure hull is the rounded area of the submarine, and then I think this metal covering is just for the bow wake. It's just for surface sailing, and probably holds ballast tanks and other equipment that doesn't need to be pressurized where the crew quarters are. So the rounded areas, the tube is pretty strong. The square is not as strong to pressure on the outside and stuff, but the round barrel is better for pressure exposure. Okay, so let's see if we can work some of that in here. We got sharks coming out of the water. We got explosions. We got cannonballs from the USS Constellation trying to impact somewhere around the pier. Okay, so let's see if we can get some of these details and while I'm talking about the mosh pit. Let me know what you guys think out there. Do you agree with me, or do you think I'm crazy? What do you think's going on, John Edwards? John's seen a lot of this craziness happen on my forum post. It got so out of hand, man. I mean, I got Fox News is trying to talk to me about what happened. I don't know who sent or who forwarded this story on to a guy in California. So what I did last night was I just researched everything this reporter had worked on, just to A, see if he was legit, and B, to know what his political bias or kind of platform was. And it led me to the Dave Rubin reports. I ended up watching a bunch of videos from Dave Rubin talking about the times we live in, and I thought it was pretty interesting. Like some of his predictions 2 years ago versus where we're at now, and a few of his guests talking about what they're seeing. It was interesting. It's really, really interesting. So this sail is actually pretty tall. I had the sail. There's like a first floor. There's like a 10-foot area of the front of it. So I'm exaggerating the length of the bow for one. But I still want to have all the details. So that's going to be narrower. Let's make, this is going to be taller. So the bottom part of the sail is tall. And then it goes up a little bit higher. There is a logo here. The periscope is at the front. Yeah, modern subs. Let me paint this out. I'm going to paint over using the Trade Center in Baltimore. Oh, back to, so my ability to teach. So I feel like, based on some things that have happened in social media, my ability to teach back on Micah might have been jeopardized. Like looking back in time, like all my reviews from teaching, my reviews were 95% glowing. I taught 2 classes at Micah, 3D animation, intro to 3D, and 3D landscape, and I had glowing reviews. Now, I said at the time, and I'll address one of the things that I think people held against me. The 1 in 20 reviews that was negative criticized something I said in my class. Context. What I said in my class was, look, kids, I'm here partly to boost my ego, but partly to, but I'm willing to share everything I know. You can ask me anything about anything, and I will share everything that 12 to 15 years of experience has. So I'm open book. So, but know what my motivation is. Like, I'm willing to share so much with you that I'll even be vulnerable and say that part of me teaching is to get better myself and also to boost myself. And I think maybe what I didn't say at the time and should have is like, you should do the same thing, where if you're feeling low about your ego, come and teach. It always feels good to come on here and share this with you. Share something that I've been developing for 30 years, which is my ability to draw. It's not as good as I could be. It's not as good as my other friends who are 30, but I think sharing is good for your self-esteem. I mean, ego doesn't always mean a bad thing. I think ego is what gives you the confidence to do whatever it is you do that's healthy for you. Like, you want to have a nice house. Well, that's kind of, you do that because you want that to affect how you feel, what your ego is. And maybe I'm misusing the term. Maybe I learned Freud's concepts of the ego, the superego, incorrectly. But I think about like self-esteem and ego being in the same. There's an unhealthy ego if someone's like over pretentious or something like that. So that's what I said. Now at the time, contextually, I said I'm partly doing the teaching thing to boost my own ego, but I'm willing to support all you guys. The good students are like, all right, cool, let's learn. Let's learn. And 14 out of 15 kids in that class, I think, learned a lot about 3D. I hope. Was Tom a jerk? Yeah, so were drill instructors. I think drill instructors, you know, who in the Army loves their drill instructor? That's kind of how I thought about it. The world is tough. This career is extremely competitive, because it's subjective and it's work-based. What you do is subjective. Is your idea good enough? Like, you can get jobs or not get jobs just based on how dumb or smart your ideas are. Forget about the execution. There's the actual quality of the execution of the work. So what I thought I was doing was being a bit of a jerk, like being a 25% of a jerk in the classroom to prepare the students for the 100% jerks that they'll find in the real world. Because I was working at the time. I was working at Zynga. I was working at later. I was working at Stardock, and I was under a lot of pressure to perform in these game companies. And I had already worked at Firaxis for many years, which I feel like I worked really, really hard at to get a position there and to work there. First 2 years working at Firaxis, average work day was like 10 hours. A lot of 12-hour days there. There's a couple nights I slept at Firaxis because we're in the middle of a project. We're crunching on something like Sid Meier's Civ 4 or Beyond the Sword. We did 3 total art conversions to Civilization 4 for the Beyond the Sword expansion pack, and I helped with all 3 of them. So we had a futon in the office, and I would sleep there. And we had a case of Red Bull, and like, there was just so much to do. I was doing special effects, I was doing 3D models, I was doing animation, did concept art. It was so much work, and we had a really, really small team to do all this art conversion stuff. I mean, the good thing is we already, in the first game, Civ 4 was just like figuring out how to make 3D Civ, and then the expansion pack was like, okay, what can we do with it now that we know how to make it? What's the pipeline? What's the pipeline? Getting messages. I hope you guys are enjoying what I'm riffing on right now. Maybe you think I'm crazy, but the context was I was working, I was stressed out, and I'm trying to share what I know with the students. I was accused by one of my former bosses, guy I respect, Dan Halka, that I'm doing it just for the money, and I really wasn't. The money wasn't good enough for that amount of time I was there. I think I might have netted $50 an hour, but I was already making 80 grand a year at Zynga. So it wasn't like an extra 5 grand was going to do that much more for my happiness at the time. I think I ended up taking that money and getting a vacation from it. I think I went to Europe with that money, which was cool. But that really honestly wasn't the reason I did it. I was not going to teach to make money. I was teaching to give back to Micah, because people from the industry came to Micah and gave me my internship, and I honestly wanted to give back and be part of that environment, be in the space, maybe do some recruiting, find some new students. Look, 2008 changed internships in the game industry, because when the crunch happened, 2010 we had layoffs at Firaxis, and then for the next 2 to 3 years we couldn't hire interns. We couldn't bring interns anymore because A, there wasn't budget for it, and B, there wasn't enough people with time to do mentoring. And what did that lead to? Well, it led to a drought of talent when people started leaving in 2011. Like 2011, high level talent started leaving for Axis because either they were fed up with the crunch or they were fed up with some management decisions and wanted to start their own companies. I left in 2012 after a lot of my good friends from working on Civ 5 had already left. So now there's this gap where there's no interns ready to be brought on for full time. And I saw this happening before it actually happened. I saw that there was going to be this gap in talent, and it was going to cost so much more to recruit senior talent from across the country to fill the spots left behind. And I don't know what they've paid for it, but I know the budget is at least $10,000 per recruit. Like the recruiting costs are so high. It's why back in 2006 when I was sent to GDC as a one part brand ambassador for Axis, one part just student wants to learn, one part perk of the company, is they gave us a huge per diem. For Axis gave us like a $400 per diem to be like a good brand ambassador for Firaxis, to recruit people at the Game Developer Conference. And if we wanted to take someone else out to eat for dinner, for beers, whatever it was, that's how we could socialize and show that, hey, Firaxis is a bunch of cool people. You should come, consider working for us. That's how corporations think, man. There's an X dollar value per recruit. I'm noticing I'm doing a thing where as soon as I get talking on a subject, I get off of the main focus and I go somewhere else in the drawing. Right? How funny is that? I kind of start drifting up. The whole point was to be on the Torsk, and I keep wandering up into these buildings and just doing mindless drawing. Isn't that interesting? So what's the solution? Well, I think people have to find groups to talk. I think you got to find your brain trust. You got to find your brain trust. And usually colleges were a place where you could do that. When you're hanging out at a school and you're in a classroom, that social environment of talking, communicating, doing work, study, lab work, whatever it is, lets you identify for yourself who you get along with, who you think's interesting, and hopefully you develop your brain trust from there. My brain trust of intelligent people is partly from Micah, of people I liked socially, who I respected their artwork. A lot of them still friends today. And then at work, at Firaxis, people I worked with, who I got along with, collaborators, inspirational people, good leaders, talented folks. And those are the groups that I bounce ideas off of. Maybe there needs to be a return to the grassroots brain trust. But there's this ideology out there that if you're not saying the right thing at the right time in the right language, then you're going to get ousted or canceled. I mean, that's pretty wild. You're going to get canceled for disagreeing with the party line. I don't know, man. I mean, everyone's so individual now. I mean, with the access to information, you can get educated and you can belong to any Facebook group, any tribe you really want. You can come up with your own club so freaking fast. Mike had a pretty good club program too, where if you just had 6 people interested in the same subject, you could start a club. You have to have a faculty advisor, I think, of some kind, and then you can. We started a Halo club. Friends I knew started a Viking club. There's board game clubs, knitting clubs, and Micah's student activities department would give you some money to get pizza and do events and stuff. And Micah did it because they knew it was great for morale. Any club that's moderately supervised is going to be better than a club that isn't. It's kind of like skate parks in cities. Like if you don't have a skate park in your city for students, for people to ride skateboards, then your entire city is a skate park, and where they're going to go. It's not really advice. It's an activity. It's an activity people like to do. You might as well sanction it in some kind of way that's safe. And I think that's what the great Stephanie Murdoch has done with Skate Park of Baltimore, and that was the argument I saw laid out for building a park and investing that money in it. And look at the return on investment. It's been awesome. Now Hamden is a destination spot for some skateboarders. Unfortunately, I was last weekend. I actually went down to Hamden a little bit just to check it out, see if anyone was skating. It was so hot. Got a souvlaki. It's cool. Man, I'm all talked out. This coffee was good. What you guys think out there? Christina's like, at this point, I'm here for the riff. Awesome. Came for the art, stayed for the riff. What's the solution? I think people got to find a way to talk. Find your tribe and get chatty with them. But you also have to keep your mind a little bit open, don't you? Don't you have to be ready for new information? Don't you have to be ready to change your opinion if there's new data presented? What's going on? NPR had a cool thing. I wrote this guy down. I just happened to be getting some Chick-fil-A, and I put NPR on. Hey, just let's hear what the left's talking about today. And it was Nicholas Christakis, a Yale researcher who wrote a book called Blueprint for a Good Society. And he was talking about the natural aspect of in-group preferences. And there was a study done with a bunch of elementary school kids, and they just gave them different T-shirts. It was like a mini version of that Stanford prison experiment, where the Stanford prison experiment was they just put a bunch of students in a group, and they said, okay, half the students are prisoners and half the students are going to be jail guards. And it got out of control so fast, where abuses started really happening, like physical abuse of the prisoners. And these are just student volunteers, but it went out of control real quick. So Christakis was saying that this study with elementary school kids, they just gave different T-shirts, like yellow, green, blue, red T-shirts, and then like asked questions and surveys of these kids. What do you think about your group? What do you think about other groups? Too long didn't read version is in big societies with there's no groups, then productivity drops. Whereas if you can subdivide that society into smaller groups, people rally their group against other groups. There's a natural amount of competitiveness. And I think this is just deep-rooted tribalism that's evolutional. Like evolutionary tribalism has kept people alive and productive. Tribes that have had some kind of competition against other tribes that did very, very well. And it's probably why Europe, exploded in the Renaissance. You had all these smaller nations competing against each other. And maybe there's a little bit of that in the United States. This group is competing against the other group. Maybe that's why the USSR worked as well as it did for so long, is it had all these Soviets working against, kind of competitive against each other. And then the massive explosion of technology and productivity between the great powers after 1939. Like when nations are warring, how far did technology evolve from 39 to 45? We went from no nuclear power to the atom bomb in 5 years. And then 5 years later, the space race because of the Soviet Union. Like technological, it's a forge. Like competition is a forge that smashes out impurities and gets to a more efficient and stronger product. Look at sports. Like if there was just like one giant Olympic team that showed up, and like what would it be like if the United States did not have the NBA and you had like 20 teams playing basketball? Like you only got the dream team that annihilated every other country's basketball program because you have a super competitive state system, like state and city system with basketball players, right? Christina says the free exchange of ideas is the only way to test your beliefs, defend them, and adjust when necessary in response to what you learn from others. Brilliant. Well said. Brilliant. Brilliant. Open debate. So did you see, Christina, did you see the thing signed by J.K. Rowling and Noam Chomsky over the weekend, like the anti-cancel culture letter? Got Twitter all up in a roar. I personally don't love Noam Chomsky. I understand people like him a lot, but I just think he's not very pragmatic. He's probably got some good points. I think his view on free speech makes sense. Like you have to defend the right of free speech, even if it's with someone you vehemently disagree against. Let's say like neo-Nazis or something. I started to get really worried when, like 2016, Trump was elected. And then there was very quickly the punch and Nazi movement. I think it came like the first. There's some alt-right guy who got punched during the Women's March, and I said, "Oh, this is going to get bad real quick because there's calls for violence. Remember, violence is different than speech. I really think First Amendment, Second Amendment, two distinct things. And dude's getting punched, and they're like, it's okay to punch a Nazi. And I said, no, no, that's assault. Punching someone's assault. That's why mosh pits are weird. Because mosh pits, you can have assault, and no one goes to jail. No one gets interviewed by the cops. There's a couple bouncers, a couple jacked former football players, former Ravens who didn't stick around too long, former Towson college football guys who are just breaking it. But it's expected that there's going to be fights. I had a friend who used to work at Power Plant Live and told me the physical altercations they get into with these drunk patrons. And they were smashing dudes, smashing, real bad behavior, real bad behavior. And the cops were like, yeah, you can smash them up and we'll arrest them after you've smashed them up. There was this like no unspoken rule between the bouncers and the police. The bouncers could do all the smashing to actually enforce good behavior because the cops were under too much scrutiny. So you can have these assaults in sports and in concert venues, right? Like drug use is tolerated at concert venues. I went to a Fish show in Meriwether Post Pavilion a few years ago, and you could smell weed from literally 2 miles away. I couldn't believe it. We were 2 miles out, like in the line to drive into the place. Took another 20 minutes away from parking. I can smell the cloud of Mary Jane coming from Meriwether Post Pavilion. I mean, maybe it's legal in Maryland now. I don't know what's up, but that was the way it kind of always was. Like Woodstock '99 was kind of like that. So you have these specific venues within society. We're talking about like we have a rule of law, and then there's these exceptions. These are like the exceptions that prove the rule. Maybe streaming's perfect for me because no one in real life really wants to listen to me rant this long. That's why I'm just destined to be a professional streamer for the rest of my life. It's gonna listen to Joe Rogan, listen to the Rubin Report, listen to Shapiro, listen to Peterson, and then go on to Huffington Post and hear what the NPR, hear what the left's saying, hear what the right's saying, hear some middle people, and then I just spew out the ramblings of everything I'm listening to. She says, no, I'll check it out. 7 likes, pretty cool. 45 minutes in. I was originally expecting to do just a half hour, and this is just turning into longer conversation. Okay, so we have waves coming up, and I want to get this mouth right. So it starts down. The nose is a bit steeper, so let's bring that back. And then the mouth does this thing where it comes up. Maybe I'll get the wave. Maybe I'll make the wave a little lower, just so that I can get more of this definition in the torsk. Since we're abbreviating and exaggerating the whole front hull here, we'll do that. The holes of the front ballast, or whatever you want to call it, are here. Something with tribalism I'm noticing is that when I post something controversial on my media, it seems to strengthen my base group of friends, people who know me, who come out to support, and they know I'm not a racist, sexist, bigot, any of those things. They're like, yeah, Tom, you speak up for the injustice that's happened to you. And other people are like, well, you're in the privileged, cis white male class. You don't get a vote here. You don't get a vote at this time. Well, there's something happened against me. I need to speak up against it. And they're like, no, you don't really get to say that right now. Court of social, whatever. Court of public opinion isn't going to side very well with you because of your class. All right, that sucks. Guess I got to put up with it. So I'm getting a lot of good feedback from the people that really matter in my life, and a lot of negativity from people who really don't matter too much in my life. And then there's a couple people in the middle who are easily misread. Like they're actually trying to say something positive, but because of how charged up everyone's mood is right now, it's being exaggerated in the negative side. Like depending on who you are and what you're reading, uh, the tenor of what is being said is kind of being skewed to your own bias on the issue. It's like this rubber band kind of effect. Like if your normal argument just wavers like this, a little left, little right, little left, little right, like this, but that. The pressure of social media and this mosh pit culture is like the elastic bands on a boxing ring, right? Or like a WWE cage. It's just a little bit is getting accelerated and is springing off that and is launching back this way and is bending and then springing off of that. So this COVID pressure cooker has like put elastic bands on everything and makes just a little wiggle exaggerated. So the solution has, if we're gonna come up with a solution for what's going on right now, well, we have to be like a chess master and look 10 moves ahead and see what's gonna happen. Because if we have this pendulum that's swinging like this, how do you slow the pendulum down? Well, you have to break it on both sides. You have to be able to get ahead of where the pendulum is and start to slow it down. You have to know where the pendulum's going in order to break it. You have to get there before. You have to set up your shield wall to catch the thing. Otherwise, the momentum's going to smash right through and hurt people. I think that's what's happened. So what do those bouncers do in a mosh pit? They catch people and slow them down. They don't shove them back out. They just kind of catch them and support them. Slow it down, buddy. Slow it down, buddy. So I think maybe it's a little bit of people maybe having the conversation. Like if you see something on social media that is upsetting, I think you need to have a phone call. You need to escalate to a better communication method. Police have escalation use of force. So if the guy's punching somebody else, the police can use a baton. If the suspect has a baton, cops can use a taser. If the suspect has any kind of deadly weapon, then the cops go to guns. And if the suspect has a pistol, then the cops can go to rifles. If the suspect has armored, like I don't know, if the suspect has a pickup truck, then the cops get an armored personnel carrier. The cops have to be able to level up to whatever the threat is. Maybe the same thing exists in social media, where you have like, what's the bottom level threat communication? Twitter? So I think you have this hierarchy of quality of communication, deeper and deeper communication. And the height of that is probably video. It's like in-person. In-person conversations between two people. Next down is video chat. Next down is phone call. Then you have like pre-made YouTube videos where one person's describing their point of view video-wise, and the other person describes their view like a turn-based debate, probably. And then below that is long-form email. Below that is like long-form Facebook conversations. And the bottom of the barrel is Twitter. I think you have to mediate disputes going up this chain. And if it's really bad, sometimes you can just circumvent the hierarchy. Go right to the phone call. Like if there's some Twitter dispute, go to video chat, go to Zoom chat, and be like, hey, what do you actually mean? What do I actually mean? And like talk this thing out. When in my own personal life, Christina posted something. The ACLU has argued in court that the only speech worth defending is offensive speech. That's where minority voices are heard. We wouldn't have the progress that we've had in the U.S. for minority groups without free speech. Sure, absolutely true, absolutely true. I will, ACLU.org, speech on campus. Yeah, what was going on campuses with Milo Yiannopoulos, the protests in like Berkeley and the West Coast, like that's when Antifa started showing their ugly side. When there was these violent protests against conservative speakers. Dude, I saw a little bit of it back in 2003. I was at Micah, and I was doing so my degree is Bachelor of Fine Art, General Fine Art major, but I had concentrations in animation and video production. So one of the opportunities I had was to follow the department head, Patrick Wright was the video department head, and he needed some extra videographers to come to Hopkins to film Ann Coulter speaking back then, 2003. So this was 2 years after 9/11, and the majority of her point was about Muslims. It was about like most terrorists are Muslims, so therefore there should be some bias against Muslims. At the time, I wasn't thinking that way. I was very liberal, going to a liberal art school. I was young. I was 19, 20 years old. And to me, it was the first time I'd ever seen a protest like in person. There was more people protesting Ann Coulter than people in the venue. And then the protesters tried to keep coming in. I remember there was this one dude who looked super, he looked like trench coat mafia kind of guy, long hair, glasses, black trench coat, had a copy of Hitler's Mein Kampf and was trying to get Ann Coulter to sign Mein Kampf to say that she's a Nazi. So I started seeing this like, Ann Coulter is definitely not a Nazi. But the first question I really had was, why is my art teacher from a liberal art school doing a documentary on Ann Coulter, who's a right-wing pundit? And he's like, I just think she's fascinating. Like, she's a fascinating human being. And I internalized that and thought, like, okay, I thought about this old military quote, which is, know your friend, like, keep your friends close, but keep your enemies closer. Like, learn, the ways of your adversary. I think the movie Sean Connery, Alec Baldwin, Hunt for the Red October, there's a line about them knowing each other's language. Like Jack Ryan knows a little bit of Russian, and Captain Vesuvius, what is his name? Sean Connery's character is like, yeah, it's good to know a bit about one's adversary. So they both knew a little of the other language. Alec Baldwin knew a little Russian, and Facilnius, something like that. Sean Connery knew a little English. I know this book. You wrote the book on Halsey? Oh, his assertion from wrong. He acted stupidly. Something. The Torsk. So this is starting to feel more accurate to the ship. So you got to know one's adversary. I think that's what Patrick was doing. He's like, this is weird. I don't understand what's going on with this woman. Let me try to drill down and figure out what she's all about. Even if he did not, I don't think he politically agreed with her. I mean, most of the people in that audience did. That same year, we saw Michael Moore, the film director, who was very popular from his Bowling for Columbine movie he made 3 or 4 years earlier, and I think was working on Sicko at the time. I now no longer love Michael Moore, but I think about Michael Moore and Coulter kind of in the same way. They're both canaries. I think Michael Moore is a good indicator of what is someone who's willing to speak about the true intent of people on the far left, and I think Ann Coulter is someone who's willing to speak honestly about what the intent and point of view is of people on the far right. And I don't think they're actually bad people. I think that they are just the messenger. And if you want to learn about your adversaries, you need to learn about what these people are. I'm not, and I like some things both of them have done, and I dislike some things that both of them have done. I thought I had sworn off Michael Moore because of his aggressive documentary style that puts people in awkward positions. I don't think that's always productive. But he produced a documentary about how clean energy is kind of been usurped. And a lot of these clean plants are just cutting trees down and burning them. A lot of these biomass plants are being advertised as green energy, but are really dirty energy that are burning tires along with live trees to make energy, and it's not clean at all. It's actually raining down like rubber and toxins on schoolyards and stuff. And then how many of these solar farms are breaking really fast, and they're really inefficient, and they're really expensive and damaging land and stuff. So I'm willing to accept some of the things I disagree with him in order to have the things I do find interesting or tend to agree with. It's kind of a gray area. Like characters, other characters in history that are controversial, I think, are like Eric Prince, who started Blackwater. I think he intended Blackwater with all good intentions, and then he had a certain set of skills and connections, and then became a bit of a mercenary for hire. That Blackwater was completely their brand was destroyed by what happened in Nisour Square, and they became a scapegoat for bad foreign policy decisions made by the State Department. So some things that they did were bad, but I think the most of them were pretty good. Another statistic I heard about is in an office space environment, for every naysayer, for every negative person, you have to have 7 positive people to keep morale good. Negativity is so powerful. It's like the dark side in Star Wars. Like one Sith Lord can mess up like 7 or 8 Jedi. I had this theory while watching Star Wars with my friend over the weekend, thinking like, what if like in Star Wars this Force is like a box of ammunition? Like, what if it's like the ability to use the Force is based on the supply of Force available in the universe, and the number of Force users have access to more of it. So if you got 10,000 Force users, well, each of them get 1 bullet. Whereas if there's one Sith guy in the whole universe, he gets access to the whole stockpile of ammunition. So he's got like rows of Gatling guns of Force abilities. So it's a Force multiplier. Yeah, that's funny. Double entendre there. Force multiplier is a term in the military. Equipment makes the brute force stronger to a higher level based on the kind of equipment they have. So Civil War times, you got a platoon of infantry with the rifled musket, and that's a force of, let's say, a platoon's 40 guys. Let's just say 40 guys for the sake of argument. Now, you fast forward to Vietnam, and one soldier with an M16 is equal to 40 guys in a Civil War platoon where they're reloading constantly, and modern forces got one machine gun, gets all that dudes. Like one Marine in Vietnam can take out an entire platoon of Civil War Confederate soldiers. No problem. No problem at all. Like, that platoon doesn't even stand a chance against the Vietnam USMC. Not even close. We dealt with that kind of idea in playing the game Civilization. Occasionally a spearman can beat a tank, but most of the time, no, they don't stand a chance. There's battles like that in all of history. Like, the whole conquest of the Americas was like that. Asymmetric warfare, right? Asymmetric warfare. Okay. Where did I get on? So we're back to solutions for the time at hand. I think you got to elevate conversation. You got to have phone calls. Like, I realized my post talking about what happened to me in my last job was read wildly out of color, and I think it's because I write in a very conversational style. I write the way I talk, which is supposed to be humorous and funny and like maybe engage. Like, I'm trying to capture people, I'm trying to hook people in by saying off the wall, non-politically coup things to get attention. And if you know that about me, then what I wrote might have sounded a little bit reasonable. Oh, it's just Tom being Tom. But if you don't know the way I speak or haven't been paying attention to how I talk, you haven't seen me in person in 10 or 15 years, like some of these people that were negative to me on my Facebook post. I don't blame them for it, but they just aren't familiar. I have to be aware that my language is different based on the audience. So what am I going to do personally? I think I'm just going to keep doing this. I'm just going to keep talking. People can hear my voice. You all out there can hear where I'm coming from. I can riff on the idea. I'm getting this from Rogan. I'm absolutely getting this point of view from watching the Rogan show. How much more deep and insightful. A picture paints, a picture's worth 1,000 words. And if you get a picture with some words, what is that worth? The words plus the picture combined. So you're getting a better view of the whole shebang. More accurate, more truthful. Right? People saying, who's still paying attention here? Am I making any sense? I hope y'all are working, actually. It's Wednesday, 1 in the afternoon. Probably your lunch break's over. So I think if everyone has started having phone calls, I think that was better. The reason I'm streaming at all, I owe to a former Micah student, Talia, who started this art making group on Facebook a long time ago, like 10 weeks ago, maybe more, 16 weeks ago. And it was just a place that people could talk and hang out and make artwork together. And I started streaming to create content for this group. So start a conversation, and then someone else can chime in. Someone has to make the first note or sound. I learned that from doing meetings at Firaxis. Like, people very rarely wanted to be the first to talk. I think people are shy. A lot of people are just shy. They don't want to say something dumb. And through my years of doing acting and playing football or being around jocks and theater folks and art folk. I learned that it was better for the group if someone just gets that conversation started, just get it going. Learned a lot from Susan Waters Eller about how to pick people out in a crowd and ask their opinion directly. Not everyone wants to volunteer to speak, but more people will be willing to speak if they're asked to speak. You really got to ask them for stuff. You really got to ask people. You got to draw it out of them a little bit. It's not a little pink, a little warm on top. Just warm up the top a little bit so that the cool on the bottom vibrates a little bit more. So we'll get a little more blue. Just kind of glaze over just a little blue underneath here. Cool. That's feeling a lot more realistic right now in context with what's going on. So that's how you make a big painting, dude. You block out everything you want, and then you zoom in digitally, and you do a little work. Problem with digital is you can get lost in these little details, man. You can zoom in infinitely and paint that down, get that one pixel right, dude. I just need that pixel there. That's where Hawkeye Halka got his name from. He just zoomed all the way in. Hawkeye Dan Halka, former boss, man. That guy is pixel perfect. Pixel perfect. I asked my buddy Jay what that's about. What's up with the pixel level of detail? And he said, well, when everything's pixel perfect, then the whole thing elevates. The whole thing's better. Okay, I'll give that to you. Daft Punk's gonna give it to you. Got the anchor. Is that Navy or is that Army? That's Army. What's the Navy one? How's the Navy one go? Anchor's away, right? Something like that. I think my neighbor was in the submarine force. I need to ask him what's up. What's up with the Navy, man? Not submarine force. Nuclear cruiser was what he was on. Not many of those built. We had back in the 70s. There was the prototype all-nuclear fleet. It had like a cruiser carrier, a couple destroyers, subs, all nukes. All nukes, baby. You know, I for one am glad that Shaz happened and was shut down. People got to see what the world without rule of law looks like, and without the police department doesn't mean there's not going to be force. Someone's going to show up. Some warlord is going to show up and create order by using force, and it's not going to be always who you hope it's going to be. I think it was YouTuber Nut and Fancy who shared some wisdom on this. Former Lieutenant Colonel, Air Force, talking about the bugging out versus staying in. And he says it's up to you individuals to have community, know who's in your neighborhood. I'm honestly pretty bad at this. I only know like a third of my neighbors. So that when things get bad, you can talk to someone in your neighborhood. You know who's good, who's bad, who's going to be taking advantage of the situation versus who are the good actors, who's the good actors, who's the bad actors. I think the Army learned a lot about that in Iraq after the awakening, where the Army, I think this was under Petraeus, started engaging the local population and paying them for information and embedding troops with the locals to find out who's the locals who belong here and who are the foreign fighters who are coming in from Iran who are just trying to wreck everything and forward some kind of political agenda, some kind of creating chaos to delegitimize the authority at the time. So any amount of chaos delegitimizes the ruling power. It's part of the revolutionary playbook. Back to sub time. Yeah, well, this has been about an hour, and I'm running out of steam. But thank you so much for joining us today. We had some good conversation. We're doing some painting here. Got the front of the Taurus worked out a little bit more realistic than what it was before. And here's some dolphins with laser beams on their heads. Why not? Hey, thanks for tuning in, Christina, and Who else? John Edwards, thanks for chiming in. L, thanks for saying hello. And for all those that watched and lurked in the corner, so I didn't get to say hi to you too. I hope you guys have a great week. Hope you had a wonderful July 4th weekend. I had a great July 4th weekend. Um, Enjoy your burgers, your hot dogs, corn on the cob. It's going to be coming. Corn on the cob is going to be coming. It's like 4 feet high in Shrewsbury. It's corn. It's growing out of control. I got some basil plants growing downstairs. Today I am going to be watching The Mandalorian tonight with a good friend. So maybe later in the week, maybe Friday, I'll do an update talking about what it's like to watch Mandalorian the second time. Thanks again, and I hope you have a great day.